didn't get, a perfect score on that, it's because you either left out details. Most likely, you left out details that made the summaries or the paraphrases difficult to understand in full. And so that's why I had you practice that, because that's going to carry over into writing the introduction. So for the introduction, let's go look at the assignments tab. Writing the introduction. So there's a PDF file, and obviously you're listening to this video, watching this video, and so you have the visual and you have the written way of explaining it. So I'm going to open up this PDF file. And this is kind of what I want for the introduction of the manuscript. Now, the class project that we're writing the entire manuscript on, in pieces. The introduction is the first part of the manuscript you're writing. This entire manuscript is based on the survey data that I have collected from you the previous weeks. So there was a survey that you were supposed to complete about COVID and COVID health variables, right? Constructs related to health and personality that is affecting COVID. So that is what our current class study that you're going to be writing on. It's about COVID. It's not your own topic. It's not what you decide to do. It's about COVID and about the variables that we're studying that were measured in that survey. And why are we doing COVID still? That everyone's done with COVID? Well, as a researcher, it's hard to be done with COVID because COVID represents something other than COVID, right? COVID represents basically how people react to a medical emergency, because that's what it basically was and still continues to be for some people. How do people take this seriously? What do people do to prevent the spread of COVID or any other major disease that can lead to increased mortality? And so we've learned a lot as a society about what people think about a medical crisis or a medical emergency. And the thing is, a lot of people don't think anything at all about it. They think, yeah, COVID, who cares? And so I'm going to live my life. I'm not going to change anything. And I'm going to go out. I don't care about getting sick. I don't care about spreading illness. I'm going to do what I want to do. We've seen a lot of that during COVID. And look, COVID has gotten better. And it's not like it was at the beginning. And obviously, no one's saying, lock yourself in a room and never come out again. Don't talk to anybody. And Zoom everything. No one's saying that. But what is important is the behavior that has occurred over several years with regard to COVID. Are people willing to socially distance? Are people willing to wear masks? Some people will say, masks have nothing to do with it. But are you still willing to do it? Even if it has nothing to do with the spread of COVID, if the government or if some medical professional tells you, wear a mask because you prevent the spread of COVID, even if that's not true, right? You don't have to believe that to be true. Will you still wear the mask sort of because you want to comply with the medical expertise or with the government, or you want to be overly cautious to protect other people? And the answer is it depends. It depends on who you are. It depends on what you value. It depends on how you believe the government is lying to you or not lying to you. Or the health experts know what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of variables involved in whether you are able to follow through on these things. And as a researcher who's more of a health clinical researcher like I am, I'm interested in this. What constructs, what variables, what situations lead people to either follow COVID protocols or not follow them? And although this is a couple of years into COVID, there's still data to be collected because this is going to happen again. It may not be COVID again, but it's going to be something else. And it might be something that's more dangerous than COVID. For instance, take like smallpox. Smallpox was a deadly virus. Smallpox was something that was very difficult to contain over multiple decades. A lot of mortality. People did take it seriously, though, and eventually smallpox was eradicated because everyone took it seriously and everyone tried to prevent it. And now smallpox is a note in the history of the world, basically. Well, with the exception of nuclear or chemical weapons, I should say. But if there was another pandemic other than COVID to come down and hit our society or the world in general, would we be prepared for it? And I think the answer is no. Because we didn't all take COVID seriously or seriously enough. And if there's a disease that spreads as rapidly as COVID but has a higher mortality rate, you have to keep in mind that COVID has such a low mortality rate that it really only affected, suspected individuals. Other than long COVID, we understand that long COVID is having an effect on many, many people. But in terms of original mortality at the time of COVID, only a subset of the population was affected. A small subset, relatively speaking. I mean, not that 1% of the U.S. population is that small. It's not. It's millions of people. But still, something like smallpox may affect 15-20% of the population. Something more deadlier could emerge at a later time. And if we act the way we did at the beginning of COVID, I mean, we shut things down, but, our society was not shut down. Yeah, you didn't go to work for the most part, unless you worked in a capacity where you had to be in person. But people were still going out, especially younger people. And they were having fun, and they were, trying to live as normal a life as possible under very abnormal situations. And that indirectly contributed to the spread of COVID. Whatever you believe in terms of whether it was good, bad, indifferent, COVID is overhyped, COVID's ridiculous, COVID's serious, doesn't matter your belief. People that disregard medical guidance do spread illness, whether it's deadly or not, right? And that's going to continue to happen, because if you tell everybody to stay home or wear a mask or socially distance, some people will and some people won't. And the goal is to understand why people don't, and sort of differentiate those people from those that actually do follow medical guidance. So that's part of what the research is looking at. Can we draw any conclusions about what types of individuals will practice COVID protocols versus those that don't? Because that will help us in the future when we get a more deadly pandemic, which is going to happen at some point. Maybe in our lifetime, maybe not. Maybe in your lifetime, not in my lifetime. It's not going to be a 100-year event like the flu of 1919. It's going to be much shorter than a 100-year event because we have a more global society, right? We have, we're not isolationists like we were in the past. I mean, our whole world is interconnected. And so there is no, let's shut the border down and stop or quarantine this state or quarantine Europe, like the Black Plague, where European countries were trying to shut their borders down to prevent the spread of the Black Plague. It's not like that anymore. It's kind of hard to shut down people from moving around the world on a regular basis. So we're going to have something in the future. How we deal with it is going to determine whether our society survives or whether we're going to change a great deal of society, because millions upon millions of people will die. I mean, that's not being pessimistic, that's being realistic. And so that's the foundation of the study, and that's why it's important to a degree, at least according to me. And that's sort of what we're focusing on. So every part of the manuscript is going to be based on this COVID study where you filled out that survey. I'm going to be looking at that data and trying to draw some conclusions. And then you're going to be writing about this study. So your writing is all going to be based on this COVID health study that you took the survey for. So here's how you're going to write it. So this section should be double-spaced, the introduction section. The title of the introduction section should be the title of the manuscript. But since we don't have a title of the manuscript yet, you can just write introduction at the top of the introduction. When you write the final manuscript, you should change the word introduction to the title of the manuscript that you came up with. So you get rid of the word introduction and put the full title of the manuscript there. But for now, you can just call it introduction. It should be at least 3 pages in length, double spaced, 1-inch margins, 12-point font. Regular font, not some crazy font. Times New Roman, Arial, whatever regular font you use, 12 points, double spaced, 1-inch margins. First 2 paragraphs introduce the topic, which is the COVID health study, and describe why it's important and real world applications. So those first 2 paragraphs should be what the study is about and why it's important. And there's a lot of reasons why it's important, and I gave you some. It's very important to predict health-related behaviors, especially when you're dealing with a very serious medical crisis or emergency. Can we in the future determine what types of people will not listen to medical guidance? And is there a way to sort of ameliorate that, make it better? Or make these people less likely to spread illness in some way? Maybe there isn't. Maybe it's impossible. I don't know. But it's at least worth trying, because if something more serious comes along, as I said before, it's going to be a huge problem. So this should be your first 2 paragraphs, what the problem is and why it's important. So that's the general background. You can give a little general background on COVID. If you want in that first paragraph to talk a little bit about COVID, you can do that. And then that second paragraph talk about the research and why it's important to do this research. That's fine. 2 solid paragraphs. Paragraphs should be a minimum of 3 sentences. All paragraphs should be a minimum of 3 sentences. She gave me 2 solid paragraphs. I do not want you to use I or we or you or your or our, because this is not a blog. This is a manuscript. So it shouldn't be like, my family did this, or my cousin, or my uncle, or I did this, I stayed home, I did this, I wore a mask. I don't want to hear that. That is more like you're writing a blog. That is not a scientific manuscript. So try to avoid I, we, you, your, our, right? Keep it more formal writing. It's very important, because every time you write that, I'm going to write a comment, please take this out, because it's very difficult to read I, we, I, our. It's not professional. You'll never see a research study written this way. This is for your blog, this is for Twitter, this is for whatever you're doing, whatever you're writing, your diary, your journal, not for the manuscript. So the first step of the process is to conduct a literature search. So after you do those 2 introductory paragraphs, you want 5 paragraphs for the literature review. Right? So you want research studies that tackle the research that we're conducting, which is based on COVID and variables related to COVID. And the variables that I studied are gender, anxiety, health anxiety, generalized anxiety, somatization, depression, which you should have written some in the discussion board, attachment style, again, that was in the discussion board, alexithymia, which is the inability to perceive emotion or feel emotion or identify emotion, and empathy, which is the ability to understand other people, take another person's perspective. You should be focusing on these variables in relation to COVID, things like mask wearing, vaccination, social distancing, listening to the health guidance, right? So how do these variables associate with those COVID related constructs? Now, each paragraph or each study should be on the following 5 hypotheses. So I want 1 study for each of these 5 hypotheses. That will make up your literature review. And that study needs to be cited. In order to cite, you need to cite APA study, which is author, year. So author, year. So you're going to paraphrase everything, and then you're going to cite author, year. So read the study, paraphrase it, give me a 1-paragraph summary paraphrased. Make sure you cite author, year, especially at the beginning of the study. After you write your first sentence of that paragraph and you're talking about the study, make sure you cite the study, parentheses, author, year. That parenthesis should be inside the period to end the sentence, right? You don't have to keep citing every sentence. Just cite once at the beginning of the paragraph after the first sentence, and you're fine. As long as you don't change articles within that paragraph, you don't need to keep citing over and over again. Just cite at the beginning. Like you could say that generalized anxiety has been shown to be positively correlated with people with the increased likelihood of wearing a mask, for example. And after you write that sentence, write in parentheses author, year, or authors, year for the citation, and then put the period after the citation. And then you're good. If you keep talking about that one summary, that one article, you don't need to keep citing because I understand that it's from the same article. But everything has to be paraphrased. You cannot use direct quotes. Right? No direct quotes. Everything paraphrased, no block quotes. This is not English. Everything has to be paraphrased and then cited. So you're going to find one article for the following 5 hypotheses. The first hypothesis is empathy will be positively correlated with the belief in the effectiveness of the COVID-19 boosters and vaccines in general. So that means if you have more empathy, you're more likely to go think about the vaccines being effective and actually go get them. Right? So you're going to find an article, research article, not a meta-analysis, which is a summary of all these different articles. I'd rather you find a single research study or a single research article and summarize that deals with this, that deals with empathy and vaccination. So how do we do that? Either Google Scholar or PsycInfo, the same thing you did for the discussion board. So we go to Google Scholar, empathy and vaccination. You have plenty of articles here. Empathy promotes COVID-19 vaccinations intention. So if you think this is interesting, click on it. You will get the abstract. If you read this abstract and you think this is useful for this is something you want to do the article summary on, then download the full article. You'll see PDF here. Now, not everything will have PDF, but if you see PDF, that means that you can get the article. Here's the article. This is from Health Psychology, the journal, 2021. And you're going to read the article, focus on the introduction, the methodology, right here. These are multiple studies you could talk about. And focus on the discussion. Don't worry all about the results. You're going to see a bunch of statistics here. This is correlation. You should know what correlation is. But then there's things like partial correlation, which you probably are not familiar with, which is basically a correlation that's controlling for one or more variables. Right, so that's a little bit more difficult to understand. But focus on don't focus on the stats. Focus on the general outcome, right? So you see in sum, right, that intention to get vaccinated against COVID relates to knowledge about belief in immunity to vaccination and empathy. So they did find something about empathy being related to vaccination. You don't need all these correlations. You don't need to put the stats in your summaries. I'm not looking for that. However, I did mention on a lot of the discussion boards that I wanted sample information about the sample. So find information in the method about the sample, right? So here we have 300 participants, and these are male-female breakdown, right? You want to include that number, that sample size, 300. And you may as well want to mention that it's predominantly female. That's important because that makes a difference in the outcomes of studies. Is, do you have more men, women, non-binary people? I mean, like whatever. You need to mention that stuff. Okay? So that's basically write one summary for each of these articles. So you should find five articles. Each of these articles should relate to the different hypotheses. So one article for the first hypothesis, which I'm showing you here. And if you go back to the second hypothesis, people who plan to take COVID booster will have higher levels of empathy than those who do not plan to get the booster. So find an article on this, if you can find as close as you can get, and then give me a one-paragraph summary. And then with hypothesis 3, find an article on health anxiety and fear of side effects from vaccines, and find an article. There's going to be articles related to all 5 of these hypotheses. So you want one article, and one paragraph summary related to that article for each of these 5 hypotheses. That gives you 5 paragraphs. So the first 2 paragraphs are introductory. The next 5 are the literature review, 1 paragraph per hypothesis. 1 article per hypothesis, and you should summarize that article in a paragraph. And you need to cite author, comma, year. Right? So this article I'm looking at here, I'm not looking at it here. This article I'm looking at here, empathy, right? You need to cite that. So there was desire to get vaccinated, I can't spell, and empathy. That's your sentence. If you want to cite it, find the article, right? And the author is these 3 people. So you're just going to put their last names, right? Peterson, Bohm, and this person, I don't even care how to pronounce it. Fetchire? I don't know. Whoever that is, sorry. I mispronounced their name. Peterson. And I think it's 2021. Period. Just like that, you cited. Now you can finish talking about the summary of that article, right? You don't need to put the conclusion at the beginning. I mean, you can put a sample of 300 or whatever their sample size individuals were examined looking at the relationship between vaccination and empathy, and then put the citation. So I'm not saying you have to put this at the beginning, the result. You can put it at the end of the paragraph if you want. But I need a 1-paragraph summary, one paragraph for each of the 5 articles you're using. You need 5 articles, 1 paragraph summary for each of them. That's going to make up the middle of the introduction. So that's 1 article. I found that through Google Scholar. If you want, you can do PsycInfo, whatever works for you. So if you're doing PsycInfo, you want to do it on the library website. So go up to library here on the BMCC homepage and go to databases. And we want psychology databases. Hit go. And either Psych Articles or PsycInfo. Doesn't matter. I'll use PsycInfo. You could use Psych Articles. It's basically the same thing almost. Click on that. And then you're going to search. You're going to have to enter your login criteria. These are my Blackboard login criterias. Your password. And then you're logged in. And if I want empathy and vaccination, search. Tons of articles. Wherever you see HTML full text or PDF full text, that means you have it. The library has it. If you don't see it, like this is a dissertation. If you don't see it here, right, the library probably doesn't have it. The library does not have everything. Does not have every article. If you really needed an article, you could do interlibrary loan, but it's not worth it. It's going to take too long. And it doesn't really matter what articles you're using. There's no perfect article. So just find one that we have in the library or that Google Scholar has. Don't be doing interlibrary loan for one article. Right? So this one, I don't see it here, so let's just skip it. I could find it at CUNY. Sometimes they have it this way, sometimes they don't. I don't think they'll have this one. May be available. Okay, let's see. May be available. Now we're going to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. And it doesn't seem like they have it. I clicked on this, I go nowhere. So, and it's a dissertation, and I really don't like using dissertations as research articles. But you have all kinds of vaccination here. Here's one. Vaccination priority. Reducing vaccine hesitancy among African Americans. They have, you see HTML full text, PDF full text, that means they have it. So you can get the article. So wherever you see this, either one of these or both, they have it. You can get that article. We have a lot of these articles, but not all of them. So don't pay for anything. Don't do interlibrary loan. Just find something that's free. Okay? So that's how to do psych info through the library. Let's go back to the introduction. Not there yet again. So there's 5 hypotheses, 5 articles, one paragraph summary for each of these articles. That is paragraph 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Right? The 5 hypotheses, the 5 articles, right? The 5 article summaries. Now, paragraph 8, the last paragraph, should include the purpose of the current study and provide the hypotheses. So in this paragraph, you really want to you want to basically take these hypotheses and copy them word for word and put them in one paragraph. So basically, the current study will examine the following hypotheses, and then you're going to not list them, but write them out into one paragraph. So your 8th paragraph should be these 5 hypotheses, word for word. So there's not much you have to do there. I've kept the introduction as simple as possible for an introductory to research course. If I'm going to write an introduction for an article to be published, it's going to be a little bit different structurally because it's more complicated to write and it's more effective if I write it differently than what I'm showing you. What I'm showing you is the very basic idea of an introduction. It's not something that would be published in that format, but it is giving you enough to serve as the introduction to a study. So it's like an entry level introduction, basically. And I do this on purpose as I want structure. And I also want to see you following directions. That's very important. I'm telling you what I want. You need to give me what I asked for. And some students will, and some students won't. The students that follow the directions are going to do better in the class than the students that just do what they want. So it's not difficult. You need 5 research articles. You need the first 2 paragraphs, introduce the topic, why is it important? Those are 2 paragraphs. And then paragraphs 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 have to deal with the 5 hypotheses listed here. Right? You're not going to list the hypotheses in this summary, right? These hypotheses are listed in the last paragraph, not in the summary paragraphs, right? But you're going to talk about articles related to each of these 5 hypotheses. That makes up your middle 5 paragraphs. And then the final paragraph is just basically these hypotheses put in one paragraph, copied word for word. And that's your 8 paragraphs. Should be about 3 pages. Could be a little bit longer, right? Shouldn't be really shorter. I expect about 3 pages. Double spaced, 1-inch margins, 12-point font. And then you're going to submit them onto Blackboard. So I will upload on the assignments tab, I will upload a link where you can submit your introduction as a PDF file. So you're going to save your file as a PDF, and then you're going to submit it to the link that I put up here on the assignments tab in Blackboard. You're going to submit your file, and then I'm going to grade it and give you feedback. The grades are from 0 to 10, 10 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. I will give you a grade, and I will give you feedback. You are then going to use that feedback to rewrite the introduction. That rewritten introduction will be submitted as part of the full manuscript at the end of the semester. So when you're doing the full rewrite, you have to submit the entire rewritten paper based on my feedback. You're going to rewrite the introduction based on what I tell you to do, how to fix it, and you're going to rewrite it for the final paper, which will be at the end of the semester. So you're going to submit the rough draft. I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to give you a grade on the rough draft. You're then going to revise and resubmit that introduction as part of the full paper at the end of the semester. So take the rough draft seriously, because your paper grade will be 50% of the rough drafts and 50% of the final paper. So I'm actually grading on this stuff for a reason. And the reason I'm grading on the rough drafts is I want to see effort. I don't want you to just hand in anything to get it over with and say, I'll just rewrite it at the end of the semester. Or I'll just write everything at the end of the semester. It doesn't work that way. You must do things throughout the course. You cannot just hand in everything at the end of the semester. So please write the introduction. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you. If you have, concerns, or you have questions about the videos talking about, or the written instructions, I can provide clarity. And then when it's due, you're going to submit it. So here's the due date. And then you're going to submit the paper to the link. I will put a link here to upload it, and as a PDF, and then I will grade it. And then you will make the changes, revise, and keep it for the end of the semester. And at the end of the semester, you will put all the parts of the paper together and submit them all as one paper. And then I will grade that, and that'll be your final paper. If you make the changes I ask you to make, and you make the paper better, you will do relatively well on the final paper. If you ignore the changes I ask you to make, then you're not going to do as well on the final paper. So please pay attention and make those changes. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. Easiest is by email. If you need to meet on Zoom, I do that as well. But email would be like the first step, right? So hope this video is helpful. Hope you know what to do with the introduction now. And bye for now. See you next time with the method section.